Okay, we're going to take a brief detour from trinomials to talk about quadratic equations. So the first thing you really got to know about quadratic equations is writing it in the standard form. So the standard form for quadratic equations is always going to be ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. So it's always going to be from greatest to least. Alright, so an x squared, then an x, then just a regular value, and it's always going to equal 0. So if we have something like this, and we have to write it in standard form, alright, this is not standard form because it does not equal 0, and all of the other parts need to be on one side to equal 0. So what we have to do to make it to equal 0 is, since we have a negative 2 on this side, we're going to have to add 2x to both sides. We're going to be left with 3x squared plus 2x plus 1 equals 0. Alright, so that is in the standard form for a quadratic equation. Okay, and if we have an equation like this, we know that this is not standard form because it does not equal 0 and like terms aren't combined. So in order to solve for this, we're going to subtract 3x squared from both sides. Alright, what we're left with is 4x squared plus 6x plus 12 equals 0. Okay, it's important that we make sure that this is in standard form. So we got an x squared, an x, and then nothing, then equals 0. Right, for greatest to least. Okay, now here's a tougher one. So we have to determine which side to put the 0 on. It's always easier. Alright, this one has 3 terms, this one only has 2 terms. It's easier just to bring these 2 terms over, especially since they're negatives. Alright, so we got a 2x squared here, and x squared here, so it's going to be plus 2x squared plus 2x squared. You can combine these steps, but I always find it easier just to do it step by step so you don't miss anything. So it's 2x squared plus 8 equals negative 5x. Alright, so we're going to add 5x to both sides now. We're left with 7x plus 2x squared plus 8 equals 0. But this is not in standard form, right? Because this isn't from greatest to least. So we just have to rewrite it. 2x squared plus 7x plus 8 equals 0. There we go. Alright, so now we're going to combine what we learned this week about writing quadratics in standard form and go back a couple weeks ago for solving trinomials when a equals 1, or for factoring trinomials when a equals 1, and we're going to learn how to solve trinomials when a equals 1. Solving just means that we're solving for x. Alright, and what it's going to boil down to, this will make sense when we get to the end of it, is a times b equals 0. So in order for a times b to equal 0, a is either going to have to equal 0 or b is going to have to equal 0. Alright, so let's see how this works. Alright, so let's see this in action. So if we have a problem like this, x squared minus 11x equals negative 5x plus 40, first thing we have to do is write it in standard form. Alright, so that means that we're going to add a 5x to this side and also going to minus a 40. Alright, so if we do plus 5x, we're left with that, minus 40. We're left with x squared minus 6x minus 40 equals 0. Alright, the equal 0 is going to be important because we are solving this. We are going to try and find out what x is. So if you remember back a couple weeks ago about how to factor this equation, alright, because we're going to eventually want x on its own, we know that we're going to have to find two numbers that the product, so when you multiply them together, they're going to be negative 40, and when you add them together, it's going to be negative 6. Alright, I like to write it down in the diamond form just so I can have a visual representation. So it's negative 40, the sum, negative 6 is the product. It's going to be 10 and negative 4, because 10 times negative 4 is negative 40. 10 minus 4 is negative 6. Oops. Should be negative 10, positive 4, because negative 10 plus 4 equals negative 6. That's why I always like writing it down, so you can double check your work. Alright, so we know that it's going to be factored into x plus 4 and x minus 10 equals 0. Alright, so this is where we get back to the a times b equals 0. So in order for something to equal 0, this equals 0 or this equals 0. Alright, so if this were to equal 0, we know that it would have to be negative 4, right? Because negative 4 plus positive 4 is 0. If this was to equal 0, we know that that would be at x equals 10, because 10 minus 10 equals 0. You might be thinking, no, wait, that's two numbers. We actually need two numbers for solving trinomials. So the answer for this is x equals 4 and x equals 10. Because if we think about when we graph x squared, it's a parabola, all right? And what we're finding when x equals 0 is where does it intercept, right? Where is the x-intercept? That is what we're finding. So there's going to be two answers. So if we want to put it simply, the steps down simply, all that we're doing to solve trinomials when a equals 1 is first, we're going to put the trinomial in standard form. So we're going to put it from biggest to smallest and equals to 0. We're going to factor it. So we're left with x plus or minus something and x plus or minus something, and then we're going to have the additive inverse. So in that last problem, now x plus 4, x minus 10. All right, if it's plus 4, it's going to be negative 4. If it's negative 10, it's going to be positive 10. So whatever the opposite of this is going to be your answer. Okay, so let's look at another problem. We have x squared minus 20x plus 38 equals negative 9x plus 8. So first thing we have to do is put it in standard form. Right, x squared is always going to have to be a positive, so we're going to bring these over to this side. So first thing we're going to do is add a 9x to both sides, so that's going to be x squared minus 11x plus 38 equals 8. We're going to minus 8 now from both sides, so that's going to be x squared minus 11x plus 30 equals 0. Okay, that's already in standard form now, because it goes from greatest to least, and it equals 0. So now we're going to factor. Alright, so we need something that is going to multiply to 30 and add up to negative 11. And those two numbers are going to be negative 5 and negative 6. Because a negative times a negative is a positive, but negative 5 plus negative 6 equals 11. Alright, so if we factor out, it's going to be x minus 5, then x minus 6 equals 0. If we solve for x minus 5 equals 0, that's going to be x equals 5. Solve for this part equals 0, that's going to be x equals 6, right? Because 5 minus 5 equals 0, 6 minus 6 equals 0. So here you go, x equals 5 and x equals 6.